Okay, if you have questions about your midterm score, I did send out a class email. But this semester, for some reason, a lot of people are not getting class emails. So if you did not receive a class email, you can come to Moodle and check class emails. I will update the title to include the date of the most recent email. So you can check there to see maybe why you got a low score and what you can do um, to help make sure that you get a high score moving forward during the semester. Okay, so today we're going to lecture and then attendance, and then I'll let you prepare for the cultural exchange next week. So this week you were supposed to begin reading the novel. Let's take a look at the discussion questions. Oh, yeah, the PowerPoint very helpfully gives you the page range. Okay, so the first one, how do the epigraphs affect your reading experience? And in fact, do they affect your reading experience? The epigraph is the part of the book before the beginning. So here we have the author and title. Here we have the dedication. And then we have these passages taken from other books. These are called epigraphs. In Chinese, 谢字. They are quotations that the author believes to be related to the book that you're going to read. So let's take a look at these. The first one, in the library, time is dammed up, not just stopped, but saved. The library is a gathering pool of narratives and of the people who come to find them. It is where we can glimpse immortality. In the library, we can live forever. This is taken from a book called The Library Book by Susan Orlean. Susan Orlean is actually a famous nonfiction author. She's most famous for writing the article that later helped create the movie adaptation starring Nicolas Cage and Nicolas Cage. So she has written a book about library books and libraries. So the relationship between this first epigraph and the book we're going to read seems quite clear. I mentioned this very quickly at the end of 2 weeks ago, but as I'm sure you now know, the novel is set in a library. That's where the story takes place. So this epigraph kind of gets us thinking about the relationship between libraries, time, and death. Immortality means not dying. And of course, with narratives or stories and the people who look for them. So a library isn't just a collection of books. You have stories, you have people, and within stories, if the book lives forever, then the story itself will live forever. And that's how a library can save time, to preserve time. So perhaps this novel will be engaging with similar ideas. Since the story takes place in a library, the novel, the epigraph, I suppose, wants us to think more about what it means to be in a library or to work at a library. How does that space affect the people? How does that space guide interactions? How does it change the way we feel and the way we talk and the way we behave? The second epigraph, who has not asked himself at some time or other, am I a monster or is this what it means to be a person? This is from Clarice Lispector's The Hour of the Star. Clarice Lispector is a very famous Portuguese author. Um, So this quotation posits the question between a monster and a person. And the idea seems to be sometimes we can't really tell if a certain behavior is normal for a person, right? So that's the question, right? That's the beginning, right? Who has not asked himself? The idea seems to be that everyone is a monster sometimes. And it may be hard to tell the difference. When are you being a monster? When are you being a person? So this, of course, is related to our story because, as I very briefly mentioned, the story is also about a serial killer, 连续杀人魔. Um, so perhaps there will be some blurring of boundaries, maybe some confusion. Who is the good guy? Who is the bad guy? Or is this killing wrong or not wrong? Right? A blurring of boundaries. Do you understand the killer or not? The third one, it is madness to write things down. This is from Elizabeth Bowen, uh, a contemporary poet. That's not right. A contemporary novelist from, I believe, Ireland. It is madness to write things down. So, of course, this quotation is related to literature and the relationship between lived experience and the record of that experience. How do authors turn experience into books? And Elizabeth Bowen apparently thinks that this process is madness. Like there's no logic, or maybe it's too ambitious, it's impossible, it appears impossible. Every book is a miracle, that kind of idea. But we could also take this idea in reverse to say that every author is a little bit crazy. You have to be crazy in order to want to write a book. So if someone has written a book, they are a little bit crazy. If we think about it this way, then this third epigraph is also related to our second epigraph. What makes a person a monster, or is every monster also a person? This question would have benefited more from group discussion because I have finished the novel, but you have not. So I'm kind of talking about these epigraphs with hindsight, 后知之明. Um, whereas it would be more interesting to see what you guys think before you have finished the novel. Other thoughts about this question? Okay, then let's look at number 2. Do you think Jane's motivation for killing people is genuine? Why or why not? And if not, what could her true motivation or motivations be? And why do you think so? So if you have read up to page 5, you know that Jane is Margot. After Jane ran away to this library, she changed her name into Margot. Now she is a different person. So Jane is the old serial killer. And page 5 is a memory or a flashback. It's a memory. She's recollecting her old experiences. She used to work as a nurse. So a nurse serial killer is what we call an angel of death. 死亡天使. So let's look at this paragraph. The ones that die are the lucky ones, I once said to Donna, the head nurse I considered a friend. A close friend, the closest friend I'd ever had. I said it right after an untimely death, one that had rattled everyone. So we have previously seen earlier in the book that an untimely death means that the person who died was not old, was supposed to recover, but instead they died for some strange reason. And of course, the strange reason is because Jane kills them. Even the patient's neglectful family. Okay, we start having some more subjective words here, right? Calling the family neglectful, not caring enough about the patient. They said she was doing okay 2 days ago, her eldest son choked out through tears. From what I'd seen and from what the day nurses said, he'd only visited twice, and both times he'd sat in the corner, staring blankly at game shows on the hospital TV. He didn't kiss her brow or talk lovingly to her the way I always did in the quiet of night. I saw how lost she was, how alone. I saw what she needed in the pools of her eyes when they stared up at me in the muted light. So apparently, Jane, when she looks into the eyes of her patients, or at least this patient, she sees someone who is lost, someone who needs, apparently, death. I hadn't meant to say what I said to Donna out loud, but I had, and there was no taking it back. A small part of me thought she might agree, but she stared. Really? You really think that, Jane? She asked. Like she'd never considered it herself. Like she hadn't seen how they shuttled so many sad, crippled, hurting souls from the ICU out through the main doors. Okay, so if you don't know, the ICU is the intensive care unit, 加护病房. Out through the main doors into cruel sunshine and wished them well, sent off to linger alone in some shadowed room until time finished them. They may as well have given them a great shove into the busy parking lot and left them wherever they fell. So here Jane is thinking like the way that the hospital treats so-called recovering patients is no different from just letting them die a slower death. Calling the outdoor sunshine cruel and then imagining that they live alone in some dark room just waiting for death. This is the kind of picture that Jane has in her mind. They may as well have given them a great shove. Oh, I already said this. Yeah, so you might as well just shove them in front of some cars and let them die. The untimely death woman didn't appear to fit that mold. Not to a casual observer like Donna, but I'd witnessed the woman's suffering firsthand. Maybe she would have gone home and recovered, but to what end? Like, for what purpose? There were crueler fates than a quick death. So here Jane kind of admits, okay, maybe this woman was recovering, but she would die sooner or later. What if she died a slow death or an even worse death? To give her a quick death is not a bad thing. So that's what Jane is saying. So the question here is, do you think this is really why Jane kills patients? Because she sees their suffering and she thinks that a quick death would be good for them? You can choose to believe her reasons, but there are some hints that maybe this is not exactly why. For example, she says that she uh, pays close attention to their family members. She looks into their eyes deeply in the middle of the night. Is this normal behavior for a nighttime nurse? I don't think so. Like nurses, they check how your body is doing, but they don't stare into your soul. So something seems to be motivating Jane to behave strangely with her patients. It could be that she's looking for an excuse to kill them. Um, but it could also be that this idea of looking into their eyes and seeing if they are lost in suffering, this could also be part of what attracts Jane to the idea of killing them. So it's not just an excuse, it's part of her process. And then she justifies killing them by saying there are worse fates than a quick death. I'll tell you now, as we continue reading, we're going to see Margot start killing people as well. Also, she will think back more on other people she had killed in the past. And we're going to start seeing her have some physical reactions to these memories and when she is killing someone new. So it's not an entirely rational choice. I mean, obviously, if you're a rational person, you're not going to rationally decide to kill people. But like her own reasons are not sufficient. These are not the only reasons that she's killing people. And we get some more clues about this later in the story. But so far, do you have thoughts about number two? If you haven't started reading the book yet, I hope this gives you some idea of what it feels like to read this book. It's very interesting. Number three, Margot's attitude toward Judy. Would you call that empathy? Or is it something else? On page 11. So now Margot is working at the library. She's been working here for a while. She has to deal with, they're not customers because they don't pay. They're patrons, people who come and use the library. And one of those patrons is Judy, a regular. Judy, a regular, has piled her stack of Nora Roberts books on the desk. If you don't know who Nora Roberts is, she writes classic romance stories. Many of them have turned into movies like You've Got Mail, Sleepless in Seattle, When Harry Met Sally, these kinds of stories. She leans close to me and asks, "You want to hear a funny story?" I nod as if I have a choice. Right. When you're doing service, when you're in the service industry, you kind of have to listen to everyone, patrons or customers. I went to my hematologist on Monday because my platelet count was high. A hematologist is a blood doctor, and platelets are the third main thing in your blood. So in your blood, the first one is red blood cells, then you have white blood cells, and then you have platelets, 血小板. They help you cure wounds. And so apparently, Judy went to see her hematologist because her platelet count was too high. The doctor said, "I hate patients like you." And then Margot thinks, "I keep a fixed smile on my face knowing what's coming next." So Margot doesn't feel like it's a funny story, but she smiles anyway. And then Judy continues quoting her doctor, "Because there's nothing wrong with you," she finishes, triumphant, crowing. Crowing means kind of like bragging, thinking it's such a great thing. She stands there, somewhere in her 80s, so she's an old lady, hands twitching, eyelids drooping, strands of hair barely covering her scalp. Your scalp is the skin on your head. Exultant, which is the same as triumphant. So this physical description by Margot is quite unattractive. Like Margot focuses on the unattractive parts of Judy's body. "That's fantastic," I respond, warming to her triumph, which means like she slowly is infected by that feeling, connecting with what must have been her fear, her anxiety, now washed away by a tide of relief, like my own when I discovered the library. This is also quite interesting. When Margot discovered the library, like she found a place where she can be a different person, she could hide from the police, she can hopefully lead a peaceful life. So that gave her a tide of relief. So Judy, she's imagining Judy's relief and then like connecting it to her own experience of anxiety and relief. Her eyes start to tear, which means like tears form in her eyes. As we beam at each other, to beam means to smile very broadly, a big smile. And mine do too. So Margot also starts feeling tears in her eyes. I pat Judy's hand and pass her the books. I liked the warm, bony feel of her hand. I wish I could have held it. Okay, so we do notice some weird things here. She she doesn't know how Judy feels. Judy tells this story as a funny story, but Margot imagines, right, what must have been her fear, her anxiety, and then relief. Fear, anxiety turning into relief. Isn't that similar to what Jane saw in her patients? The woman, she looked into the woman's eyes and saw a lost soul. She thought that the woman was being neglected by her family. It as if the woman wanted to die. And so when Jane kills her, she imagines that her victim gets a sense of relief. And then we'll also notice at the beginning, Margot doesn't really care about the story. She performs the image of caring. But then, as Judy expresses her triumphant feelings, Margot Margot's own feelings start becoming similar. Right, her eyes start to tear as we beam at each other, and mine do too. It's like Margot's body is copying Judy's body. And then finally, one last weird thing. Margot likes Judy's hand and wanted to hold Judy's hand, which is not something I think we usually think about every day. So the question is, would you call Margot's reaction empathy? Empathy meaning that you can feel what the other person feels. I don't know. I think Margot is trying to perform empathy. She wants to make Judy feel like she understands her. But it seems we have some clues to show that Margot doesn't actually feel what Judy feels. On the one hand, she knows what the story is going to be, but she doesn't feel like it is a funny story. She pretends. And then um, empathy is usually a mental reaction, right? We hear a story, we think that it's such a great or terrible story, and then we give our reaction. But here, Margot's reaction comes from her body. Her body reacts first, and then her mind kind of follows her body, if it follows physical reactions at all. And then this middle part, Judy is only expressing joy, but Margot is also imagining some negative emotions that she thinks Judy felt before that triumphant ending to her story. Feeling or seeing emotions that are not actually there is called projection, 投射. So I think this is a very detailed description of somebody who is trying to pretend like she feels empathy. But from the process that Margot goes through, it feels like she doesn't naturally feel empathy for other human beings. And that the emotions that she imagines for Judy are from her own life and experience, not based on whatever Judy is telling her. And then we end with a personal desire. Like instead of like thinking or about the story, or instead of like sharing Judy's positive emotions, she ends by saying, "Oh, I love that hand. I want to hold it." Kind of creepy. So we start to slowly get a picture of what kind of person Margot is. Other thoughts about number 3? All right, let's move on to number 4. The sentence, sadness welled up in me so fast that I had to vomit in the parking lot. It's kind of a funny sentence. Let's look at this part. Page 18. Okay, so here Margot is again thinking back to her time as the angel of death, Jane. And here, this is the time when she had to leave the hospital where Donna worked. She had to leave in a hurry because Donna was starting to suspect that Jane was a killer. So she leaves through the main glass doors. And then on page 18, I looked back once, though I shouldn't have. No one was there, just the hallway, shining like water. It already felt alien and remote. Alien here just means strange. Like every other place from my past. Cramped old family home, threadbare apartment. Threadbare means kind of cheap and empty. Sickly yellow tiled grade school. Sadness welled up in me so fast that I had to vomit in the parking lot. I had to throw up in the parking lot. Then I stood and walked straight back to my exhausted little car. I drove, burying Jane and building Margot mile after mile. Okay, so some more things we can pay close attention to. She has decided to leave, she's looking back, but the place where she worked, where she found her one best friend, already is starting to feel strange. Her mind has already left this place. It is no longer her place. And this process of leaving has occurred before in her life. As she says, every other place from my past. So every time she leaves somewhere in her life, the place starts feeling alien and remote. And the first example she gives is her old family home. Now, I know some of you are living in the dorms, some of you are living alone or with roommates off campus. If you're no longer living at home, every time you go back, does it feel alien and remote? I mean, maybe it feels a little strange because you've spent some time away from home. Some small things might have changed, but it probably doesn't feel alien and remote, like it's completely separate from your own life. So already, like this idea is a bit strange. Whenever Jane leaves a place, suddenly that place no longer feels like it's part of her life. So with the disappearance of one more important place in her life, she starts feeling sad. Sadness welled up in me. To well up just means like an artesian well, 自流井, right? The water comes out by itself. So sadness welled up in me so fast that I had to vomit in the parking lot. So it's an emotion and it comes on very fast, so fast that Jane's body cannot handle it. And so she ends up throwing up before she's able to get into her car. We know that emotions are based on hormones, right? You feel a certain feeling because your body's chemical balance changes, causing a feeling inside you. And then, based on the situation, we interpret that feeling as some kind of emotion. We feel something first, and then we try to find out why we feel that way. Here, her body's physical reaction is so fast that she couldn't handle it. It ended up making her puke. And it looks like she only later recognizes that this feeling is sadness, or this is the name that Jane later gives to this feeling. Right? If it's so fast that your body can't handle it, you probably don't have time to think about what it means either. It's just a feeling. Only later do you have time and energy to try to understand why you felt that way. So that could be an explanation for that sentence. Um, once again, we have an example of Margot's or Jane's, same person, physical reactions coming ahead of her understanding of those reactions. It does feel like she's lacking in emotional understanding compared to a regular person. And I guess that's kind of what helps her be a killer. Okay, other thoughts about this one? All right, number 5. Margot thinks that Patricia's library must be more scholarly and removed above it all. Do you think there are different kinds of libraries? If so, how would you describe some of them? If not, why not? Okay, so Patricia is the second character of the story, a newcomer to the library, uh, graduated from a good college, ended up in the rural middle of nowhere. Um, she's younger, she looks more attractive. Um, so Margot feels a certain way about this new coworker. Yvonne is their manager. So let's start here, page 19. When Yvonne comes to the circ desk or the circulation desk, where you check out and return books, 流通柜台, I blurt, which means I say without thinking. How's she getting on? Tilting my head toward Patricia. Like, how is she doing? I hope Patricia herself didn't hear, though my voice was louder than I intended. Once again, we have a detail about how Margot doesn't have full control over her physical actions. Her body goes before her mind. Fine, Yvonne says, nodding and smiling, looking vaguely satisfied. Does she, okay, so this line is Margot. Does she, what does she do? Yvonne chuckles. She's still getting the lay of the land, which means she's still figuring out the workplace. She's still trying to become familiar with her new job. But she'll be weeding our reference materials and expanding our electronic resources too. So Patricia is hired as a reference librarian. This kind of librarian's main job is, as Yvonne is talking about, to take care of the reference materials, dictionaries, encyclopedias, sources of information. To weed, usually this is applied to like a garden. To weed is to pull out plants that you don't want that may negatively affect the plants that you do want. So to weed here means to throw away reference materials that they no longer need or that are too old or that are falling apart and can no longer be used, and to keep the stuff that is still valuable. And of course, Patricia will be dealing with electronic resources. You guys know how, like, if you go log on to the library website, you can find research articles and electronic information. That's not automatic. There are people working to maintain that database. And that's part of Patricia's job as well. And answering reference calls, of course. Okay, so in Taiwan, it's no longer very common to see a reference librarian, but before the internet, if you needed a random piece of information, there were two things you could do. One is you can call the local library and ask for the reference librarian, and their job is to answer your question. They're like a human Google. So that's what a reference call is, when somebody calls on the phone and asks a random question. And that is also Patricia's job. By the way, the other source of information before the internet was for some specific kinds of information, there were phone numbers that you could call. You can still call these numbers today. If you want to find out the time, you can call a number. If you want to find out the weather, you can call a number. And these numbers are still working today. It's just nobody uses them anymore. Yvonne and I stand there in silence, watching Patricia. She looks like a diligent schoolgirl, one of those overachievers, students who do too much. Is that what's needed in the library? I shrug. To move your shoulders up and down, Songjian. Her library must be different from mine, more scholarly and removed, above it all. So Patricia is a professional librarian. She got a master's degree in library sciences. So Margot is thinking, to Patricia, the library must be a different kind of place. More scholarly, more removed above it all means like separate from ordinary life. I guess in Chinese, kind of like 抽离,飘在云端中, something like that. Maybe that's the realm of the reference desk. So maybe this is what uh, it feels like to be at the reference desk. Okay, I say, because I can't say anything else. So the question is, Margot's thinking about Patricia's background and Patricia's experience of libraries, and thinking that the way that Patricia has experienced libraries is quite different from the way Margot experiences them. We will see later in the novel that Margot is a rare librarian who does not read books. Most people work in a library because they like books. Margot works in a library to hide from the police. So, of course, her experience of libraries will be very different from Patricia's and from most librarians. But the novel also spends time describing regular patrons, people who often come to the library. Some of them come to borrow books. Some of them come to read books and newspapers and magazines. Some of them come to use the internet. One of them comes to watch pornography secretly. Um, Libraries often also have many other services, especially in rural areas in the United States. Um, you can borrow various tools from the library. Our library, you can borrow notebook computers if you need one. Some libraries, you can borrow suits and clothing for like job interviews. Libraries are also often used as community centers. So like when some kind of expert passes through, they might have a talk or a lecture at a library. Or maybe there's some kind of activity to promote community bonding, to get to know your neighbors. Maybe there are some arts and crafts classes. You can go and like make art with your neighbors. So libraries are not just about books. They also can offer many other experiences. Of course, some libraries are like Patricia's library, mainly about the books, mainly about the knowledge. So you can think about your own experiences of going to different libraries. This would be, again, a really good question for group discussion. We have our own library here, but ours is a university library, so it's focused on the knowledge and studying. Maybe you went to your local library near your home and saw lots of random people sitting around reading newspapers and chatting. Some libraries are louder than others. Some libraries you can make more noise, you can have quiet conversations. Or maybe you've been to a library holding a special event, and that library was very active, lots of energy, people running around doing things. And maybe there was a sense of community among the regular people who went there often. And this Variety of libraries can help us understand this location. Libraries are about more than just books. So that opens up the question of how do people behave in different kinds of libraries? And how do different library spaces lead people to behave in different ways? Architecture and library design is also a very important area of expertise. I recently read a blog post about what the author called the world's worst designed library. And according to the author, it's a bad design because everywhere you look, it's all metallic and uninviting. And also, the sound is not muffled, which means if you talk, the sound spreads very far and very loudly. And the building just does not feel like humans belong there. And also, most of it is underground. Not underground. Here's the really strange thing. The library is above ground, but you have to enter from the roof and you have to go down. And because it is a very important library, it's actually one of the national libraries of Paris, there are multiple security checkpoints. So you can't just walk in. You have to give them your bag. You have to let them check you. You have to register your name. And it's like, according to that blog post author, it's like descending into hell. So library design can also have a big impact on how people feel and behave in a library. The design of this library will become important near the end of the novel. Okay, do you have thoughts about today's discussion questions? Okay, so I'm now going to take attendance and then you can take a short break. When we come back, uh, you will look for your cultural exchange group members and begin preparing for next week.